A particularly rewarding part of my job as an anthropology professor is getting to know students during their time as undergraduates, to learn their passions, ambitions, and ideas for their and our futures. So many of our students move on to amazing careers within and outside of anthropology and change the world in important and unexpected ways. Today's commencement speaker is a perfect example of the critical impact that anthropologists can have on the world, both within and outside of academia. Stephen DeBerry graduated from UCLA with a BA in anthropology in 1995, receiving both college and departmental honors. He then went on to earn his master's in social anthropology and an MBA from the University of Oxford. A 20-year Silicon Valley veteran, today Stephen works at the intersection of community and business. As the founder and general partner of Bronze, a leading venture capital fund that mixes investing with positive social impact, Stephen draws from the training and skills he developed as an anthropologist to bring technology, capital, imagination, and in his own words, yes, even some love to everyday people. This innovative investment firm sets out to drive positive outcomes for everyone, especially people and communities on the social, economic, and environmental margins. In this way, he fights to bring prosperity from disparity. When Stephen is not steadfastly working to break down disparities between communities, you can find him giving TED Talks or curating the Record House in East Palo Alto, an art project whose goal is to build one of the most interesting record collections you'll find through connecting the Silicon Valley community with visitors from across the country. Stephen is also a former USA National track and field champion, running the 400-meter hurdles. And let me tell you, as a former track athlete who ran the 400-meter dash, it's the most difficult race out there, I don't care what anybody says. And Stephen added hurdles to it. I attempted hurdles once and ended up with a broken sesamoid bone. That is one of the 8 wrist bones, but all of you bioanthros out there already know this. One of the most adventurous feats I discovered about Stephen is that he was part of the first African-American mountaineering team to ascend Denali, the highest mountain in North America and one of the 7 summits. His accolades don't stop there. He was a British Marshall Scholar, a Henry Crown Fellow at the Aspen Institute, and architect in residence at the Hip Hop Archive at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Studies at Harvard University. He has been named one of the 100 most powerful African Americans in the United States by both Ebony Magazine and the Root Washington Post, as well as named to the 2018 Yerba Buena 100 list for his work at the intersection of art, community, and business. While there is so much more I could say about Stephen's innovative spirit, his generosity, and his many accomplishments, I think it is time to invite Stephen to the podium so that you can experience him firsthand for yourselves. So please help me give a very warm and proud welcome to Stephen DeBerry, our 2024 Department of Anthropology commencement speaker.
I'd like to start out by thanking you, Professor Bigham, and the entire anthropology faculty for having me as a guest back home. And I want to start out by sharing how personally fulfilling and grateful I am for this moment. UCLA is the place where my foundation was poured. You probably can't see it, but in the track behind us, I did some quick math, and we'll spend a few minutes here talking. I spent about 360,000 minutes on that track behind us. In front of Powell Library, I saw a young lady, 1992, and bought a piece of fry bread from her. She was raising money for a protest at the time. And that lady is now sitting here. She's my wife of 18 years. Christine, thank you for being my partner. And there's no way I'd be here without you. I'm joined also by my son, who appropriately has pledged his allegiance and intention to join us as a student at UCLA. Have that aspiration. And my daughter Ella, who has set the bar. She was the commencement speaker for her 8th grade graduation last week, so I better not mess this up. She's not pledged her undying allegiance to UCLA just yet, but she'll come to her sentence pretty soon, hopefully. And finally, my best friends in life, Doctors Hunt and Cheshire, who I met here at UCLA. And what collectively that all points to is a very, very full life for which I am so grateful. I really can't describe. And that full life is the fruit of this university and this department. So I stand here as just one example of the many that are to come. But I'm most enthusiastically here to celebrate you, the class of 2024. Congratulations. My enthusiasm is inflamed by the memory of what it was to sit in your seat, because I graduated on this very field almost 3 decades ago. We share very similar journeys, and today is an institutional rite of passage to celebrate that path. Even though our journey along it may be different, the path is the same. My journey began very innocently, or really I should say ignorantly, because I took my first anthropology class not knowing what anthropology was. The truth is I liked a girl that was taking it, and she was taking anthropology, so it made sense to follow her. And the reality is I got into the class, and the first human enigma that I experienced was sitting next to this girl and wondering, how could somebody so cute be so god-awfully boring? But the class that I was taking was amazing. It was Anthro 33. It was Alessandro Durante talking about culture and communication. And at that point, I was hooked. And while I was taking the class, I learned about another professor, Dr. Marcelino Morgan, who was teaching about hip-hop culture. And I didn't realize you could do that, but the reality is you can do that because we study all things that human beings do. And I have memories, and I'm sure you certainly will resonate with, like the long walks down Bruin Walk, or waiting for office hours on the floor of Haynes Hall. I still remember the aroma of Doug Holland's coffee cup. And while I don't know your particular journeys, I do know you. You're a graduate of UCLA. So here's what I know about you. I know that you are the product of a broad liberal arts education. That means you know how to think broadly about the physical sciences, the social sciences, the humanities. You are well-rounded. I know from being a student overseas that that's not always the case. You are unique in that way. I know that you know how to write. And as a grown man who runs an investment firm and hires and fires lots of people, I cannot tell you how important it is that you have that power to write and express yourself clearly, to communicate, to advocate. I know that you have that. I know that you can learn. I know that whether or not you consider yourself, you are a teacher. You have the ability to teach yourself. You have the ability to teach others. I know that because you're a product of this university. And more specifically, you're a product of this department of anthropology. You understand physical anthropology, and importantly, just how vanishingly thin the dividing line is, the genetic dividing line is between us, regardless of how we present physically. The fact is, we're all almost exactly the same. You will understand archaeology and how the remains of our physical past can help us contextualize where we are in the current moment and where we may be going in the future. You understand linguistic anthropology and the role of not just language, but space and the way we organize ourselves, and feeling, emotion, turn-taking. You understand social cultural practices and rituals, all of our ways of being. I want to particularly celebrate the Lemelson Scholars, all 11 of you. I got to talk to a couple of you before we came out. And you, I hope, will appreciate how excellent your work is. I took the time to go through all of your work. And you really clearly dug deeply. You really are trained well. You're the best that this anthropology department has to deliver. And I'm really in awe of you. Congratulations. It's often a question here at graduation ceremonies or at large, well, what will you do with an anthropology degree? You know, where do these questions, the broad range of questions that you're asking, apply? The short answer is everywhere. And what can you do with an anthropology degree? And the short answer to that is anything. You could be an academic anthropologist like Margaret Mead or some of our forebears. You could be a doctor like Dr. Paul Farmer, who ran Partners in Health. You could be a venture capitalist like Nancy Fund, who was one of the early investors in Tesla. I don't know if anyone's doing any work on the founder of Tesla to understand that, but that'd be a worthwhile dissertation. The list goes on, the list goes on. But your future is limited only by two things. One is your own imagination, and two is your willingness to persist down the course that you chart for yourself. That's it. Everything else is up to you. There is no aspect of human endeavor that's outside your reach, and that's a beautiful thing. Anthropology is arguably the most powerful discipline that you could be exiting this university with. So in mere minutes, you will be conferred a degree from UCLA. This is an institution that for the last 7 years in a row has been ranked the top public university in the United States of America. With all that will come, for sure, prestige. There will be economic opportunity. There will be social status. But you know what this degree will not give you? It will not give you common sense. It will not make you kind. It will not make you lean in to listen intently, even to things that you don't agree with or don't want to hear. It will not make you a good person. Only you can do that. So as my grandmother would have said, act like you have some damn sense. The way you choose to be as a person matters, because you're not only an anthropologist, but you are history. You are history. This graduation is not without historical context, and you are not and never will be immune from the politics of the moment. Young leaders at UCLA have never shied away from the most intractable issues of our day, from the civil rights movement when Bunchy Carter was assassinated in Campbell Hall, to the resistance and the movement to establish the hunger strike that created the Chicano Studies Department here, which is where I met my wife, to the recent conflict to stop the bombing in Gaza. And I will say, I'll confess that I've struggled mightily with what to say or not to say. I've been asked to speak here from people that I deeply respect. I've been asked not to speak by people that I deeply respect. And I've spent the last 2 weeks meditating and trying to empty myself to find the right way to be of service to you today, graduates. And so, while I want to acknowledge the struggles in pursuit of a ceasefire in Gaza explicitly. And I want to use my voice to support the efforts to create a stop to the bombing, to the burning that's happening in that region and anywhere in the world. What I really want to do is I want to tell you a story from up the road. I want to tell you a story from Jerusalem. 10 years ago, I found myself in Jerusalem traveling with a bunch of friends. Most of them were Jewish. And we went to the Western Wall. And of course, many of them went to pray. I'm not Jewish, but I'm a general believer. I'm a spiritual man. And I wrote a note to myself and rolled it into a tiny scroll, and I placed it in the wall. And I put my arm on the wall, and I put my head into my arm, and I began to meditate and pray. And I found myself transfixed. I went into my own trance and found myself having quite a personal experience in that space. So personal, in fact, that when I lifted my head from my arm, I realized I'd been there for I don't know how long, and all the people I'd come with had left. And so I found myself standing there in the middle of Jerusalem at the Wailing Wall by myself. And so I decided to just turn this into an adventure. And I walked around the walls from the Western Wall and found myself to the entrance of Al-Aqsa Mosque, which abuts the Western Wall. And the gentlemen who were controlling the door told me that I needed to go away. I explained to them how important it was for me to get in. They asked me for some credentials. They asked me to recite Al-Fatiha. And to their surprise, and somewhat to my own, I did. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I began. I recited the first chapter of the Quran and made my way in. And I ended up praying with Muslim brothers and sisters as I had with my Jewish brothers and sisters maybe an hour or so before at the Western Wall. And I came back out from that experience and went back to the Western Wall, and by this time dusk was falling, and the Jewish community was chanting and singing, holding hands and rejoicing. There were birds that nest inside the Western Wall, and they were circling while folks were singing. And at the same time, inside Al-Aqsa, folks were praying and rejoicing and doing the same thing. And I had a realization, which is that when I was a student here at UCLA, the common wisdom was that there would never be peace in the Middle East. And the realization that I had in that moment was that I was experiencing peace in the Middle East in that moment. People were rejoicing on both sides of that wall. And one of the things that I didn't understand was that this chasm that I had imagined between Jews and Muslims as being so intractable, so unsolvable, was in fact groups of people on essentially two sides of the same wall. You could literally hear folks on the other side of the wall from either side. That's how close we had been to the peace the whole time. That evening, I went home. I woke up the next morning, and I continued on my adventure, meandering through Jerusalem, and I found myself in a tight ball of tourists walking through the serpentine hallways of the Old Town. I didn't know where I was. I was just flowing as you would with a school of fish. And so my school turned down one corridor, and I followed them. And we went into a courtyard and what looked like a church, and so I followed. There must be something interesting. And I crossed the threshold of this building, and I have to tell you, I felt something. I don't know what it was, but I felt something. And on the floor was this stone, I don't know, about 6 feet long, and there was water being poured all over it. People were kneeling. I came to learn later that this was the Church of the Sepulchre. I didn't know what that is, but this is the stone where Jesus' body was interred. And I knelt down on my hands and knees, and I put my forehead on that stone, and I wept for about 30 minutes. And I got up, and on the way out, I saw a man just sitting very patiently, very solemnly near the exit. And I struck up a conversation with him. For some reason, I was just called to talk to this guy. And turns out his name is Mr. Nusseibeh. He's a friend of mine now. And Mr. Nusseibeh and his family have been holding the key to that church for 7 generations. Now, here's the interesting fun fact about Mr. Nusseibeh. In the Church of the Sepulchre, holding the key to the church that has the stone where Jesus' body was interred, Mr. Nusseibeh is a Muslim man. I never would have imagined this. And why do I share this story with you? I share it partly to point to how delicate and thinly sliced and braided together our human condition is. I also share it because, to me, it points to the fact that the stories that most of us are told most of the time don't capture the texture of the human experience. When you read the news, you would not realize that the Western Wall and Al-Aqsa Mosque are that close together, or that people are rejoicing peacefully together on a regular basis. You would think that there's so much conflict between these categories that we imagine ourselves to be part of, and you don't understand how much we, in fact, rely on each other. And so my main point here is that, as Zora Neale Hurston said, there are years that ask questions, and there are years that answer. And graduates, I think 2024 will be a year that does both. And for that reason, we need you. We need you, not just the fancy best public university in the country, degree-having version of you. It's pretty impressive. But more than that, we need all of you. We need your most courageous version of your entire personhood. That's what's demanded now. You are among the most well-prepared to observe, to interpret, to translate. You employ the faculties of the sciences, physical, social, to nurture what we need, which is a more supple and a more tender understanding of the human condition. You are the small group of thoughtful, committed citizens that Margaret Mead talked about. So now, go change the world. Thank you.